My ex-husband blocked me at the door of the VIP suite after I had driven 15 hours through a thunderstorm with crippling sciatica. He looked me up and down with disgust and delivered the sentence that would end up costing him thousands of dollars. "We don't want you in here, Josephine. We don't want your bad genes infecting this baby." 3 days later, when the hospital administrator called me asking to authorize the $9,000 final bill for the birthing package I had secretly deposited for, I didn't get angry. I just smiled. "Where are you listening from today? Drop your city and the time in the comments below, and please hit that like and subscribe button to support the channel." Now, let me back up and explain how we got to this delicious moment of justice. I had been driving for 15 hours straight. My lower back was screaming at me. It wasn't just a dull ache anymore. It was that sharp electric burning of sciatica shooting all the way down my right leg. Every bump in the road felt like someone was jamming a hot poker into my spine. I shifted my weight, trying to find a position that didn't make me want to cry out, but there was no relief. My doctor had told me specifically not to sit for long periods. He told me my back needed rest, but my doctor didn't understand what was waiting for me at the end of this drive. My daughter, Wendy, was in labor. I saw a sign for a rest area and flicked my blinker on, guiding the car off the highway. I didn't want to stop. Every minute I spent parked was a minute I wasn't with her, but my eyes were blurring from exhaustion and my leg had gone numb. I needed to stretch, or I wasn't going to make it the last 2 hours. I parked under a flickering light pole, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment listening to the rain drum on the roof. I took a deep breath, reached into my purse, and pulled out my bottle of ibuprofen. I dry swallowed 2 pills, wincing as they went down. "You can do this, Josephine," I whispered to myself. "You're almost there." I pulled my phone out of the cup holder. No new messages. That was good, I suppose. It meant the baby hadn't arrived yet. I opened my photo gallery and clicked on the last picture Wendy had sent me. She looked so tired in it. Her face was puffy, and she was forcing a smile, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't an easy pregnancy. The doctors had used words like high risk and preeclampsia. They were worried about her blood pressure. They were worried about the baby's heart rate. When a mother hears those things, the world stops. You don't care about your own pain. You don't care about sleep. You just care about them. I rubbed my thumb over her face on the screen. My sweet Wendy. She tried so hard to be strong, just like I taught her. But I knew she was scared. And I knew who she was stuck in that hospital with. Gregory, my ex-husband, her father. Just thinking his name made my stomach tighten into a knot harder than the one in my back. Gregory Tinch, the man who had spent 30 years of marriage making me feel like I was the smallest, most insignificant person in the room. He was charming to strangers, always buying rounds of drinks and flashing his watch. But behind closed doors, he was cold, exacting, cruel. He would be there, pacing the hallways, barking orders at nurses, acting like he owned the place. He loved the attention of a grand event, and the birth of his first grandson was the perfect stage for him. I sighed and leaned my head back against the headrest. I could have flown. A flight would have only taken 3 hours. It would have saved my back. It would have been the sensible thing for a woman my age to do. But I couldn't fly. I couldn't afford the ticket. Not because I was broke. Well, I was living on a fixed retirement income. Social Security didn't stretch very far these days, and with the cost of groceries going up, I had to watch every penny. But I had money in my savings. I had a nest egg. The problem was, I had already spent it. 6 months ago, when Wendy first told me about the complications, I started looking into the hospital where she was delivering. I read reviews. I looked at the facilities. I wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to feel safe. I saw they had something called the Platinum Birthing Suite. It wasn't just a room, it was a private sanctuary. It had a specialized nursing team, a comfortable bed for recovery, and a quiet environment away from the chaos of the general ward. It was designed for high-risk pregnancies to keep the mother's stress levels down. It also cost $5,500, and insurance didn't cover a dime of it. I knew Gregory wouldn't pay for it. He would call it a waste of money. He'd say, "Women have been birthing babies in fields for thousands of years. She doesn't need a hotel room." That was Gregory. He had money for his golf clubs and his new truck, but when it came to his family's comfort, suddenly his wallet was welded shut. So I did what a mother does. I made it happen. I didn't tell Wendy. I didn't want her to feel guilty. I just called the hospital billing department quietly one afternoon. I set up a payment plan. For 6 months, I stopped buying meat at the grocery store. I turned my heat down to 60 degrees in the middle of winter and wore 3 sweaters inside. I canceled my cable TV. I sold the little gold locket my aunt had left me. Bit by bit, check by check, I paid that deposit. $5,500. I paid it off last week. The receipt was folded up in my purse right now, tucked next to my driver's license. I looked out the window at the rain. I was tired. I was sore. I was eating peanut butter sandwiches on this drive because I didn't want to spend $5 on a fast food burger. But I didn't care, because when I walked into that hospital, I was going to hand the nurse that receipt number, and I was going to make sure my daughter was treated like a queen. Gregory could strut around and pretend to be the big man, but I was the one who had secured her safety. I was the one who sacrificed. That was the difference between us. He threw money around when people were watching. I spent mine when no one was looking, just to make sure my family was okay. A sharp pain shot down my leg again, making me wince. I opened the car door and stepped out into the drizzle. The cold air hit my face, waking me up a little. I stretched, hearing my back crack. I walked a slow lap around my car, limping slightly until the feeling came back into my toes. I was 65 years old. My body wasn't what it used to be, but my spirit was iron. I thought about Gregory again. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. The last time we spoke, he told me I looked tired and old. He told me I was irrelevant now that the kids were grown. He loved to use that word, irrelevant. He tried to make me feel like I was just a ghost in my own children's lives. "You're not irrelevant, Josephine," I said to the empty parking lot. "You are her mother." I got back into the car. The seat was still warm, but my back protested immediately as I sat down. I ignored it. I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway. The rain was letting up slightly, just enough that I could see the taillights of a truck far ahead of me. 2 more hours. I could do 2 more hours. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, finding a station playing old soft rock. I gripped the wheel at 10 and 2. I was driving into the lion's den. I knew Gregory was going to make comments. I knew he was going to look at my old car and my comfortable shoes and sneer. I knew he was going to try to push me out, to make the day about him. Let him try, I thought. I had a secret weapon in my purse. I had the confirmation number for the Platinum Suite. I had the knowledge that I was the one taking care of Wendy. I pressed my foot down on the gas pedal. The engine hummed, pushing me closer to the city. My back throbbed with every mile marker I passed, a constant, rhythmic reminder of the distance I was traveling. But pain was temporary. Regret was forever. And I wasn't going to regret missing the birth of my first grandson. I promised I wouldn't let my pain stop me. A grandmother does what she has to do. Getting out of the car was harder than the drive itself. My legs felt like heavy blocks of cement, and that shooting pain in my lower back had settled into a dull, throbbing ache that radiated all the way down to my ankles. I had to hold onto the door frame for a solid minute just to steady myself, waiting for the blood to rush back into my feet. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had just driven 15 hours through a storm. My gray hair, usually pinned back neatly, was frizzy from the humidity. My clothes, a comfortable pair of elastic waist slacks and a loose cardigan, were wrinkled and stiff from sitting so long. I didn't look like the wealthy, polished grandmothers you see in magazines. I looked like a tired old woman, but I didn't care. I grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat. Tucked safely inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the baby blanket I had spent the last 4 months knitting. It was a soft yellow yarn, neutral, because Wendy wanted the gender to be a surprise. I had stitched a tiny bumblebee in the corner. It wasn't an expensive store-bought gift, but every loop of that yarn held a prayer for my grandson. I walked toward the hospital entrance, ignoring the stiffness in my knees. The automatic doors slid open, and that familiar hospital smell hit me, antiseptic and floor wax. I went straight to the front desk. "I'm looking for Wendy Tinch," I told the young woman at the counter. "She's in the Platinum Wing." I said Platinum Wing with a little bit of hidden pride. I knew exactly where she was because I was the one who had secured the reservation. I knew exactly what the room looked like, the soft lighting, the private bathroom, the reclining sleeper chair for the father. I had memorized the brochure when I sent that check for $5,500. "Fourth floor. Take the elevators to the left," the receptionist said, hardly looking up. The elevator ride felt like it took a year. My heart was hammering in my chest, not from the caffeine I'd been drinking on the road, but from nerves. I just wanted to see her. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, the atmosphere changed completely. The linoleum floors were replaced with carpet. The walls weren't that stark, blinding white. They were a soft, calming beige. It was quiet here. This was what I paid for. Peace. I walked down the hallway, counting the room numbers. 401, 402. And then I saw him. Gregory was standing outside room 405, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He was wearing a suit jacket with jeans, his attempt at looking casual but expensive. He was talking on his cell phone, laughing about something, looking completely relaxed. My stomach dropped. It was a physical reaction, like missing a step on a staircase. I hadn't seen him in 2 years, but his posture was exactly the same. The arrogance radiating off him took up more space than his body did. I took a deep breath, straightened my back as much as the pain would allow, and kept walking. He spotted me when I was about 20 feet away. His laugh cut off instantly. He lowered the phone, ending the call without even saying goodbye to whoever was on the other line. He stepped away from the wall and moved to the center of the hallway, effectively blocking the door to Wendy's room. "Josephine," he said. His voice wasn't warm. It was flat. "What are you doing here?" I tightened my grip on my bag. "I'm here to see my daughter, Gregory. I'm here for the birth of my grandson." He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my wrinkled pants and my comfortable walking shoes. He curled his lip slightly, a look I knew well. It was the look he used to give me when I bought generic brand cereal instead of the expensive stuff. A look of pure disdain. "You look like a wreck," he said, shaking his head. "Did you sleep in your car?" "I drove straight through," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Is she okay? Has the baby come?" I tried to step around him to get to the door, but he sidestepped, blocking me again. He was taller than me, broader, and he used his size to intimidate. He always had. "She's sleeping," he said sharply. She's heavily sedated. The doctors finally got her blood pressure down, and she is out cold. Do not go in there and wake her up with your drama." "I don't have drama, Gregory," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I just want to sit quietly by her side. I won't wake her." "No," he said. He crossed his arms over his chest, standing like a bouncer at a club. "You're not going in there." "Excuse me?" I blinked, confused. "She is my daughter, and she is resting in a premium suite that I provided for her." Gregory lied. He said it so smoothly, without even blinking. "I put my girls in the best. We are handling this as a family, a functional family. We don't need you dragging your baggage in here." My mouth fell open slightly. He was taking credit, standing there in the hallway of the wing that my savings account had paid for. He was claiming it was his doing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach into my purse, pull out the receipt, and shove it in his face. I wanted to tell him that while he was buying new golf clubs, I was eating toast for dinner to pay for this room. But I stopped myself. If I started yelling, I would wake Wendy. If I caused a scene, security would come. Wendy needed rest. Her blood pressure was dangerous. Stress could hurt her. Stress could hurt the baby. Gregory saw my hesitation and took it as weakness. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a cruel whisper. "Look at you, Josephine. You're old. You're bitter. You bring a dark cloud everywhere you go." He gestured vaguely at the air around me. "We want a fresh start for this boy. We don't want your bad genes infecting this baby." The words hit me like a physical slap. Bad genes. He wasn't just insulting me. He was insulting the very essence of who I was as a mother and grandmother. He was saying that my blood, the blood that ran through Wendy's veins, was poison. My genes. I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to hold it together. "I raised her, Gregory. You were never home. I raised her. And look how long it took her to get her life together." He scoffed. "Wendy has moved on. She's happy. I'm happy. We don't need you here." He pointed a finger at my chest. "Turn around. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. You aren't wanted here." I stood there, shaking. My back was screaming in pain. My heart was breaking. I looked at the closed door behind him. My daughter was right there, just 10 feet away. I could probably open the door and rush in before he stopped me. But then what? A shouting match over her hospital bed? I couldn't do that to her. I loved her too much to make her labor a battlefield. I looked down at my hands. I was still clutching the bag with the blanket. I brought this," I said quietly. My voice sounded small, defeated. "For the baby. I made it." I held out the tissue-wrapped bundle. Gregory looked at it like it was a dead rat. He sighed, annoyed, and snatched it out of my hand. "Fine," he said. "I'll give it to her when she wakes up." He turned toward the large trash can that was sitting near the nurse's station cart, just a few feet away. He didn't even unwrap it. He didn't look at the yellow yarn or the little bumblebee I had spent hours stitching. He just dropped it into the bin. It landed with a soft thud on top of a pile of paper towels and empty coffee cups. "There," he said, turning back to me with a smirk. "It's taken care of. Now leave." I stared at the trash can. I felt something inside me fracture. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, hollow realization that this man had no bottom. There was no limit to his cruelty. I looked at him one last time. I didn't cry. I was too shocked to cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded, slowly. "Okay, Gregory," I said softly. "I'll leave." He looked surprised for a second that I gave up so easily, but then he just smirked again, victorious. He turned his back on me and started typing on his phone again, dismissing me completely. I turned around. My shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor. The walk back to the elevator felt longer than the walk there. My back seized up with every step, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the burning in my chest. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked past the Platinum Wing sign that I had paid for. I pressed the down button on the elevator. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me. He thought that by throwing my blanket in the trash and calling my jeans bad, he had erased me. As the elevator doors slid closed, blocking out the sight of that hallway, I didn't feel weak anymore. The tears were there, hot and stinging in my eyes, but beneath them, something else was waking up. He had kicked me out of the room I paid for. He had thrown away my gift. He had called me poison. I wiped a single tear from my cheek as the elevator descended. "You want me gone, Gregory?" I whispered to the empty metal box. "Fine, but you better be careful what you wish for." I didn't make it far. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the car in the lane, and the tears were blurring the streetlights into long, smeary lines. I pulled into the first place I saw, a roadside motel with a flickering neon sign that buzzed loud enough to hear through the glass. It wasn't nice, but it was cheap, and right now, I didn't care if I slept on a park bench. I just needed to stop moving. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial lemon cleaner. The carpet was that ugly shade of brown that hides dirt, and the bedspread looked like it hadn't been updated since 1985. I locked the door, threw my bag on the floor, and collapsed onto the edge of the mattress. My back finally gave out. The adrenaline that had kept me upright in the hospital hallway was gone, leaving nothing but a throbbing, white-hot pain in my spine. But I hardly felt it. The physical pain was distant, like it was happening to someone else. The real pain was in my chest. It felt like someone had reached inside and crushed my heart with a vice grip. Bad genes. The words echoed in the empty room. They bounced off the peeling wallpaper. "We don't want your bad genes infecting this baby." I dragged myself off the bed and walked into the tiny bathroom. The fluorescent light flickered on with a hum, casting a harsh, green-tinted glow on everything. I looked in the mirror. I saw the wrinkles around my eyes. I saw the sagging skin on my neck. I saw the gray hair that I hadn't had the money to color in months. I looked old. I looked tired. Was this what he saw? Was this what made me bad? I gripped the sides of the porcelain sink, leaning in until my forehead touched the cold glass. I started to cry. It wasn't a polite cry. It was an ugly, heaving sob that came from the bottom of my stomach. I cried for the 15-hour drive. I cried for the baby I wasn't holding. I cried for my daughter, who was lying in a hospital bed thinking I didn't care enough to show up. But mostly, I cried for the 30 years I had wasted on Gregory Tinch. I remembered a Tuesday in 1998, when he was 10 years old. I was standing in the kitchen, clutching a grocery list. Gregory was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper, a fresh cup of coffee in his hand. "Gregory," I had said, my voice small, "I need $40 for groceries. We're out of milk and bread." He didn't look up. He just turned the page. "I gave you grocery money on Friday, Josephine." Where did it go? It went to food. I tried to explain. The prices went up, and Wendy needed lunch money. He finally looked at me, lowering the paper. He looked at me with that same cold, dead expression he had in the hospital hallway today. "You are irresponsible, Josephine. You don't know the value of $1. You think money just grows on trees." He lectured me for 20 minutes about budgeting. He made me feel small. He made me feel stupid. And the whole time he was lecturing me, the sleeve of his shirt was pulled back, revealing a brand new gold watch that cost more than our car. He had bought it for himself the day before. He could spend thousands on jewelry without blinking, but he made me beg for milk money. That was my life, begging for scraps while he feasted. And I stayed. I stayed because I thought it was best for Wendy. I stayed because I thought I had nowhere else to go. I let him chip away at my soul, piece by piece, until I believed him. I believed I was the problem. I believed I wasn't good enough. And now, 30 years later, he was still doing it. He was still standing in the doorway, telling me I wasn't good enough, telling me I was poison. I washed my face with cold water, trying to scrub the memory away. I grabbed a rough towel and patted my skin dry. I walked back into the bedroom and sat down on the lumpy bed. I reached for my phone. I needed to check my bank balance. I needed to see how much money I had left for gas to get home. I opened the banking app, my fingers moving automatically. The screen loaded, bright blue in the dim room. Available balance, $412. My eyes drifted down to the transaction history. There it was. The most recent charge cleared just yesterday. St. Mary's Hospital, Platinum Maternity Services, minus $5,500.00. I stared at that number. $5,500. It was my entire savings. It was the money I had set aside for a new roof. It was the money I had been saving since the day I signed the divorce papers. I looked at the number, and then I thought about where Gregory was right now. He was sitting in the recliner in Suite 405. He was drinking the complimentary gourmet coffee. He was stretching his legs out on the plush carpet. He was probably bragging to the nurses about how he demanded the best for his family. He was sitting in a room I paid for. He was comfortable because of my sacrifice. He kicked me out like a stray dog, told me I was trash, and then turned around and sat down in the luxury lap of my hard work. The tears stopped, just like that. The sobbing in my chest vanished, replaced by something hot and sharp. It started in my stomach and shot up my spine, straighter and stronger than the sciatica. It was anger. Pure, righteous, boiling anger. Why was I sitting here in a motel that smelled like smoke, crying over a man who was stealing from me? Why was I accepting his narrative? He said I had bad genes. He said I was unwanted. Well, if I was so unwanted, then my money should be unwanted too. I zoomed in on the transaction on my phone screen. Pending? No. Posted. But there was a phone, number listed right next to the charge. The billing department. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was late. The billing office would be closed, but they would open at 8 a.m. tomorrow. I set the phone down on the nightstand with a firm clack. I wasn't going to drive home tomorrow. I wasn't going to tuck my tail between my legs and disappear. Gregory wanted to erase me. He wanted to pretend I didn't exist. Fine. Let's see how well he exists without me. I laid back on the pillow, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman holding a grenade, and Gregory had just pulled the pin. Enjoy the room tonight, Gregory, I whispered into the darkness. Because tomorrow the bill comes due. I stayed in that motel for 3 days. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe a small, foolish part of me was hoping Wendy would call. I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes, praying to see her name pop up. I imagined her waking up, asking for me, and telling Gregory to stop being ridiculous. I imagined a text message saying, "Mom, please come back. We need you." But the phone never rang. For 3 days, I sat in that cramped room with the peeling wallpaper, watching game show reruns and eating peanut butter crackers from the vending machine down the hall. I slept in my clothes. I paced the floor until my back throbbed so hard I had to lie down on the floor to straighten it out. Silence is a loud thing when you're waiting for an apology that isn't coming. By the morning of the 3rd day, the hope had finally run out. I woke up looked at the silent phone on the nightstand, and realized I was being pathetic. I was waiting for permission to be a mother. I was waiting for an invitation from a man who had thrown my handmade blanket in the trash. "That's it, Josephine," I said out loud. My voice sounded raspy in the empty room. "Pack your bags. You're going home." I started shoving my few belongings back into my overnight bag. My toothbrush, the extra pair of socks, the book I hadn't opened. I felt heavy, like I was carrying lead weights in my pockets. I had driven 15 hours to see my grandson, and I was leaving without even knowing his name. I zipped the bag shut with a sharp zzzzzt sound. I grabbed my purse and keys. I was done. I was going to get in my car, drive the 15 hours back, and try to forget this ever happened. I was reaching for the doorknob when my phone buzzed. I froze. My heart leaped into my throat. "Wendy?" I scrambled to grab it from my purse, my hands shaking. I looked at the screen. It wasn't Wendy. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to explain why I was crying in a motel room. But something told me to answer it. "Hello," I said, clearing my throat to sound steady. "Hi, is this Josephine Gaither?" A woman's voice. Professional. Cheerful. "Yes, this is she. Hi, Mrs. Gaither. This is Linda from the billing department at St. Mary's Hospital. How are you today?" My stomach dropped. "Billing? Of course. I'm fine. Linda," I said, leaning against the motel door for support. "Is everything okay? Is Winnie okay?" "Oh, the mother and baby are doing wonderful." Linda chirped. "They are actually preparing for discharge later this afternoon. I'm just calling to wrap up the final details on the Platinum Suite account before they leave." "Oh," I said, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They were okay. They were going home. Okay. Well, I paid the deposit in full. $5,500. The balance should be zero. "Right. Yes, I see that payment here," Linda said, and I could hear her typing on a keyboard. Click, clack, click. "But we do have some incidental charges that were accrued during the stay. Since you are the cardholder on file for the room, I just need your verbal authorization to run the balance so we can print the discharge papers." I frowned. Incidental charges? What kind of incidentals? The Platinum package was all-inclusive. It covered the room, the nursing care, the meals for the mother. What else could there be? "Well, let's see here," Linda said. "It looks like there were several orders from the celebration menu ordered by the father, Mr. Tinch." My grip on the phone tightened. The father ordered from the celebration menu? "Yes, ma'am. Let me just list these out to confirm. We have a deluxe surf and turf dinner for 2, lobster and filet mignon, ordered on night 1. We have a bottle of sparkling cider and a gourmet dessert tray. We have 3 days of premium valet parking services for a guest vehicle, a Ford F-150, Gregory's truck." And Linda continued, oblivious to the rage building in my chest. "It looks like he also requested the upgraded sleeper sofa with the Egyptian cotton linen service. The total for the add-ons comes to $3,840. The room spun. $3,000? While I was sitting here eating peanut butter crackers, Gregory was eating lobster. While I was sleeping on a lumpy motel mattress in my clothes, Gregory was paying extra for Egyptian cotton sheets. He had kicked me out. He had told me I was unwanted. He had told me my genes were bad. And then he had turned around and ordered a feast on my credit card. He wasn't just cruel. He was a parasite. He thought I was so desperate for his approval, or perhaps just so stupid, that I would quietly pay for his party just to keep the peace. He thought I was the same woman I was 30 years ago, the one who begged for grocery money. "Mrs. Gaither?" Linda asked, her voice faltering slightly at my silence. "Are you still there?" Can I go ahead and process that on the visa ending in 4590? I looked at my reflection in the motel mirror. I didn't see the tired old woman anymore. I saw someone else. I saw a grandmother who was done being a doormat. I remembered his words perfectly. We don't want your bad genes here. No, Linda, I said. My voice was calm. Scary calm. You cannot process that. Oh, Linda sounded confused. I'm sorry? Is there another card you'd like to use? No, I said. I don't think you understand. I'm not paying for the lobster, and I'm not paying for the linens. In fact, I'm not paying for the room. There was a long silence on the line. Ma'am, you already paid the deposit. That cleared last week. Yes, I said. But here is the situation. When I arrived at the hospital 3 days ago to sign the admission papers and check in as the guarantor, I was physically barred from the room by the father, Mr. Gregory Tinch. I didn't know that. Linda stammered. He was very specific. Linda, I continued, pacing the small room now, feeling stronger with every word. He stated that I was not family. He stated that my presence was unwanted. He stated that he and his daughter had moved on and that they did not want my, and I quote, bad genes involved in this birth. Oh, Linda whispered. So, I said, since I was never admitted to the room, and since I never signed the final financial responsibility paperwork upon check-in, I am not the guarantor for this patient. Is that correct? There was a pause. I knew hospital policy. I knew that until I signed that paper at the front desk on the day of arrival. The deposit was just a hold. It wasn't a binding contract yet. Technically, Linda said slowly, if you never signed the admission forms, then no, you aren't the legal guarantor. Exactly, I said. And since Mr. Tinch has made it clear that he is the head of this household, and I am not welcome, surely he intends to pay for the services he consumed. I would hate to insult him by paying for a room I wasn't allowed to enter. I see, Linda said. Her tone had shifted from cheerful to serious. She realized what was happening. So here is what I would like you to do, I said. Please remove my credit card from your system immediately. I am revoking my authorization for the deposit. Since services were denied to me, I would like that $5,500 refunded to my account. Today, Mrs. Gaither, Linda said nervously, if I refund the deposit and remove your card, the account will show a delinquent balance of nearly $9,000. We can't discharge the patient until the bill is settled. I understand, I said. Mr. Tinch is in the room, isn't he? He's probably enjoying the Egyptian cotton sheets right now. I believe so, yes. Good. Then you can walk upstairs and ask him for his credit card. I'm sure a man of his taste has the funds to cover the luxury suite he insisted on occupying. Okay, Linda said. She sounded shell-shocked. I will go speak with him. You do that, Linda. And if he asks why, I added, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in days. Tell him Josephine sends her regards. Tell him I took my bad genes and my money home. I will, she said. Thank you. Goodbye. I pressed the red end call button. I stood there in the silence of the motel room, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. The air felt light. My chest felt open. I looked at my bank app. I knew it would take a few days for the refund to post, but the money was coming back. My money. The money I scrimped and saved for. It wasn't going to pay for Gregory's lobster. It wasn't going to pay for his valet parking. He wanted to be the big man. He wanted to be the patriarch who didn't need me. Well, congratulations, Gregory. You just got the bill. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the motel room. The sun was shining outside. The storm had passed. My back still hurt, but as I slid into the driver's seat of my car, I didn't feel pain. I felt free. I put the car in reverse backed out of the parking spot, and pointed my car toward the highway. I didn't look back at the hospital. I didn't cry. I turned up the radio and started the long drive home. I was mile marker 102 on the interstate, humming along to the radio when the chaos finally erupted back at St. Mary's Hospital. I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes, but Wendy told me every detail later. And honestly, I know Gregory so well, I didn't need to be there. I can picture it. I can see the vein popping out in his forehead. I can hear the specific tone of voice he uses when he realizes he's not the smartest person in the room. It was around 1 p.m., discharge time. Gregory was strutting down the hallway of the Platinum Wing, like he owned the building. He was wearing his suit jacket, probably unbuttoned to show off his belt buckle, pushing the expensive stroller he had insisted on buying, the one that cost more than my first car. Wendy was walking beside him, moving slow. She was still sore, still exhausted from the C-section, holding my new grandson against her chest. She told me later she just wanted to go home. She felt heavy. She was sad because I hadn't shown up. Gregory had told her I was too busy to make the drive. He told her I had called and said the weather was too bad to risk it. He lied to her face while she was recovering from surgery, painting me as the absent, selfish mother. But the truth has a funny way of coming out, especially when money is involved. They reached the front administration desk. This wasn't the regular checkout line. This was the concierge desk for the VIP floor. It was quiet, polished, and staffed by the head administrator. Gregory parked the stroller with a flourish. He tapped his fingers on the marble counter. "We are heading out," he announced, not even looking at the woman behind the desk. "The bags are already in the truck." Valet brought it around. The administrator, Linda, the sweet woman I had spoken to, looked up over her glasses. She didn't smile. "Certainly, Mr. Tinch," she said. "I just need to settle the final balance on the account before I can print the discharge papers." Gregory waved his hand dismissively. "It's all taken care of. My ex-wife handled the deposit, and insurance covers the rest. Just give me the receipt." "Actually, sir," Linda said, her voice steady and professional, "there is a significant outstanding balance. The total due today is $9,340. Wendy stopped rocking the baby. She looked up confused. Gregory froze. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. "Excuse me? 9,000? You people are incompetent. The deposit was 5,500. That covers the room." "The deposit was removed, sir," Linda said. She turned the computer monitor slightly so he could see. "The payment was revoked by the cardholder this morning. That, combined with the $3,000 in luxury add-ons, the catering, the valet, the linen service, brings your total to over $9,000. "Revoked?" Gregory's face turned a shade of red I knew intimately. It was the color of his temper. "She can't revoke it. That's my money. That was a gift." "It was a deposit made in Josephine Gaither's name." Linda corrected him. "And since she was denied access to the facility, she requested a refund." "Denied access?" Wendy's voice was quiet, barely a whisper. She stepped closer to the desk, clutching the baby tighter. "What do you mean, denied access?" Gregory spun around, trying to block Wendy from the conversation. "Don't listen to her. Wendy, it's a clerical error. Your mother is playing games. She's trying to ruin your special day because she's jealous." He turned back to Linda, slamming his hand on the counter. "Run it again. Or just charge the card on file. You have her card." "I cannot do that, sir," Linda said. She didn't flinch. "I spoke to Mrs. Gaither myself. She was very clear." "Clear about what?" Gregory shouted. "She's a bitter old woman." Linda folded her hands on the desk. She looked Gregory dead in the eye. "I wish I could have seen it. I wish I could have seen the moment a stranger stood up to him in a way I never could. Mrs. Gaither stated that she was informed her presence was unwanted. Linda said, her voice carrying through the quiet lobby. She told me that you specifically said you didn't want her bad genes involved in this birth. She felt that since her genes weren't good enough for this family, her money wasn't either. The silence that followed was deafening. Wendy felt the blood drain from her face. Bad genes. She looked at her father. She looked at the man who had spent the last 3 days eating lobster and drinking sparkling cider while she learned how to breastfeed. She looked at the man who had told her, just hours ago, that I didn't care enough to come. You told her that? Wendy asked. Her voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was shaking. You told Mom she had bad genes. I was protecting you. Gregory snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. She's toxic. Wendy, look at what she's doing now. She's stranding us here. She's leaving you with a bill. She didn't leave me with a bill, Wendy said, the realization hitting her like a wave. She paid for this room. She paid for the platinum suite. You told me you paid for it. You took credit for it the whole time. I contributed. Gregory stammered. I'm the father. I'm the grandfather. You ordered lobster, Wendy said, looking at the itemized bill on the screen. You ordered Egyptian cotton sheets for the sofa while I was in labor, and you put it on her tab. We need to leave, Gregory hissed, grabbing the handle of the stroller. I'll sort this out later. Let's go. Sir, Linda called out, signaling to the security guard standing near the elevators. You cannot leave the premises with the patient until the account is settled. We accept Visa, MasterCard, or cashier's check. Gregory looked at the security guard. He looked at Wendy, who had stepped away from him, putting distance between her and the stroller. He looked at the people in the waiting room staring at him. He was cornered. He pulled out his wallet with trembling hands. He slapped his own credit card down on the counter. Fine. Charge it. I'll sue her later. Just charge it. Linda took the card. She swiped it. We all know what happened next. Beep, beep, beep. Declined, Linda said softly. Gregory turned purple. Try it again. It's a platinum card. It says insufficient funds or over limit, sir. Of course it did. Gregory lived on credit. He leased his car. He rented his condo. He lived life thinking the bill would never come due. But today, the bill was due. $9,000 due. He tried another card. Declined. He tried a debit card. Declined. Wendy just watched him. She watched her father, the man who acted like a king, crumble into a desperate, sweaty mess. She realized then that everything he had ever told her was a lie. His wealth, his power, his love. It was all a show. I have to make a call, Gregory mumbled, refusing to look at his daughter. He pulled out his phone and dialed the one person who still enabled him, his 80-year-old mother. Wendy listened as he whispered frantically into the phone, begging, Mom, please. It's an emergency. Josephine screwed me over. Yes, I need $9,000. I'll pay you back next week. Please, Mom, they won't let us leave. A grown man, a grandfather, begging his elderly mother for money because he was too proud to treat his ex-wife with basic human decency. It took an hour for the wire transfer to come through. An hour of Gregory pacing the lobby, sweating through his suit. An hour of Wendy sitting in a chair, holding her son, not saying a word to him. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked at him with new eyes. The spell was broken. When the payment finally cleared and the receipt printed, Gregory tried to laugh it off. He tried to put his arm around Wendy. What a nightmare. Huh? Your mother really is crazy. But I fixed it. I always fix it. Wendy flinched away from his touch. Don't touch me, she said. Wendy, come on. Get the truck, she said coldly. Drive me home. And then I want you to leave. Leave. Gregory blinked. But the baby… You said you didn't want bad genes around the baby, Wendy said, looking down at my grandson's sleeping face. I think you were confused about whose genes were the problem. She walked out the automatic doors without waiting for him. I was 200 miles away, driving through the sunshine, but I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the heater. It was the feeling of balance returning to the universe. Gregory had paid the bill, but the real cost was something he couldn't put on a credit card. He had just lost his daughter, and he didn't even know it yet. It was 2 days later when the phone finally rang. I was in my garden. That's my sanctuary. It's not much, just a small patch of land behind my little bungalow, but it's mine. I was on my knees in the dirt, wearing my old gardening gloves, pulling weeds from the hydrangeas. The sun was warm on my back. The air smelled like damp earth and blooming jasmine. For the first time in a week, my back didn't hurt. The sciatica had finally calmed down, almost as if my body knew the stress was over. I reached for my trowel and felt the phone vibrate in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands on my jeans and pulled it out. The screen was bright in the sunlight, but I could read the name clearly. Gregory. My stomach did a little flip. Not out of love and not out of fear anymore. It was just a reflex, like when you touch a hot stove and pull your hand back before you even feel the burn. For 30 years, that name on a screen meant trouble. It meant I had done something wrong. It meant a lecture was coming. I stared at it for a moment, listening to the birds chirping in the oak tree. The old Josephine would have let it go to voicemail. The old Josephine would have hidden in the house and shaken with anxiety, wondering what he wanted. But I wasn't the old Josephine anymore. I was the woman who had driven 15 hours alone. I was the woman who had closed her wallet on a tyrant. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just waited. Josephine. His voice was tight. I could hear the background noise, a TV blaring, maybe a baby crying faintly in the distance. Josephine, are you there? I'm here, Gregory, I said. My voice was calm. I surprised myself with how steady it sounded. I dug the toe of my sneaker into the soft dirt. I've been trying to reach you, he said. He sounded breathless, like he was trying to run uphill. We need to talk about what happened at the hospital. Things got out of hand. Did they? I asked. I picked a dead leaf off a bush and crushed it between my fingers. I wasn't there, Gregory. Remember? I was asked to leave. He let out a sigh, the kind that used to make me rush to apologize. Look, I know I was harsh. It's been a stressful time. The baby, the blood pressure issues with Wendy, I was under a lot of pressure. I'm the patriarch of this family, Josephine. I have to protect everyone. Sometimes I say things in the heat of the moment. I listened to him spin his web. He was doing what he always did, minimizing. He was painting himself as the stressed-out hero, and his cruelty as just a slip of the tongue. He wanted me to say, "It's okay, Gregory. I understand." He wanted me to soothe him. "Is that why you called, Gregory?" I asked. "To tell me you were stressed?" "I called because we need to settle this mess you made." His tone shifted instantly. The charm evaporated, replaced by the jagged edge of his temper. "You embarrassed me, Josephine. Do you have any idea what it looked like?" Standing at the front desk, card declined, begging the staff not to call the police. My mother had to wire me money. My mother. "That sounds unfortunate," I said. "Unfortunate?" "It was $9,000, he shouted. The phone crackled with the volume of his voice. $9,000. You pulled the rug out from under me. You can't just revoke a deposit like that. That money was for your grandson." "No, Gregory," I said, standing up and brushing the dirt off my knees. That money was for a room I was kicked out of. That money was for a service I was denied. You're being petty, he spat. You did this to hurt me. You did this to make me look small in front of Wendy. And now I'm in the hole for $9,000. And the baby needs things. When he needs things, you are taking resources away from your own family just to prove a point. I walked over to the wooden bench under the trellis and sat down. I looked at my garden. I looked at the flowers I had grown from seeds. They didn't need much, just water, sun, and patience. They didn't need lobster dinners. They didn't need Egyptian cotton sheets. Let me ask you something, I said, cutting him off. Did you enjoy the lobster? Silence. I saw the bill, Gregory. Linda read it to me. Surf and turf. Sparkling cider. Valet parking for your truck. You ordered a feast while your daughter was recovering from surgery. I needed to eat, he stammered. I was supporting her. You were celebrating yourself. I corrected him. You were celebrating on my dime. You stood in that hallway, looked me in the eye, and told me I had bad genes. You told me I was poison. You threw the blanket I made into the trash can. It was a cheap blanket, he yelled, defensive now. It looked like something from a thrift store. It was made with love, I said softly. But you don't know what that looks like, do you? I don't have time for your sentimental garbage, he snapped. I'm talking about finances. I expect you to reimburse me. I expect you to write a check for half of that bill. It's the least you can do after the stunt you pulled. You owe me that respect. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. Respect? You want respect? I am the father. I am the head of this house. Then pay the bill, I said. The line went quiet again. What? He whispered. You heard me, I said, my voice hardening into steel. You want to be the big man? You want to be the patriarch? You want to tell everyone how you provide the best for your family? Then be that man, Gregory. A real man doesn't beg his ex-wife for money. He insulted her for having. A real man doesn't kick a grandmother out of a hospital and then demand she pay for his parking. You can't do this, he said. He sounded desperate now. I can't afford this right now. The truck payment, the condo fees. That sounds like a you problem, I said. Maybe you should have thought about that before you ordered the deluxe package. Josephine, please, he tried to pivot back to charm, but it was too late. I could hear the panic underneath. Think about the baby. Think about Wendy. I am thinking about them, I said. I'm thinking that Wendy needs to see her father for who he really is. She needs to see that you're not a king, Gregory. You're just a man with a credit card you can't pay off. You're a bitter, selfish woman, he hissed. I was right about you. You are poison. You said my genes were bad. I reminded him, looking up at the blue sky. So, I didn't want my bad money to insult you. I kept it to myself. To keep you safe from the infection. I will never forgive you for this, he threatened. You will never see this kid. I'll make sure of it. You don't have that power anymore, Gregory. I said, you spent all your power at the discharge desk. I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't wait for the next insult. I simply pulled the phone away from my ear. Goodbye, Gregory. I pressed the red button. Click. I sat there on the bench, holding the silent phone in my lap. My heart was beating a little fast, but my hands weren't shaking. Not even a little bit. For 30 years, I had let that man define my reality. I had let him tell me what I was worth. I had let him make me feel small, so he could feel big. But today, I felt giant. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with soil, rough from work, wrinkled with age. They were the hands of a woman who had built a life, dollar by dollar, struggle by struggle. They were good hands. I put the phone back in my pocket. I stood up and walked back to the hydrangeas. There were still weeds to pull. There was still work to do. I knelt down in the dirt, feeling the cool earth against my knees. I hummed a little tune as I went back to work. Gregory Tinch was just a noise in the distance now, a storm that had finally passed. And my garden was just beginning to bloom. The week that followed that phone call was the quietest week of my life. You would think that silence would be lonely, especially for a woman living by herself. But it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for Gregory to call and yell at me. I wasn't waiting to be told I had done something wrong. I had said my piece, I had set my boundary, and I was sleeping better than I had in 20 years. But there was still a hole in my heart, a small ache where my daughter and grandson were supposed to be. I kept my phone close, but I didn't call. I knew that if I reached out now, Gregory would twist it. He would tell Wendy I was harassing them. He would spin the narrative. I had to trust that the seeds I planted, the truth about the money, the truth about his cruelty would eventually grow. I had to trust that I raised Wendy smart enough to see the cracks in his armor. It was Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the hospital incident. I was sitting on my front porch, drinking coffee, and watching the mailman drive down the street. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that makes you feel like good things are possible. Then, a car turned into my driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't Gregory's truck. It was a silver SUV, Wendy's car. I stood up slowly, setting my coffee mug down on the railing. I didn't run. My legs felt a little shaky, but I stood my ground. I watched as the car rolled to a stop. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and Wendy stepped out. She looked exhausted. That's the only word for it. She was wearing sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. She moved slowly, wincing a little as she stood up, the lingering pain of the C-section. But it wasn't just physical pain I saw in her face. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like she had been crying for 100 miles. She didn't look at me right away. She walked to the back door of the SUV and opened it. She unclicked the car seat from the base and hauled it out, grunting with the effort. She was alone. No Gregory. No luggage. Just her and the baby. She turned around and walked up the driveway toward the porch, carrying the heavy carrier. I walked down the steps to meet her. I wanted to hug her, but I held back. I didn't know where we stood. I didn't know if she was here to yell at me for embarrassing her father, or if she was here to make peace. She set the car seat down on the concrete walkway. She stood up straight and looked me in the eye. "Mom," she said. Her voice cracked. "Hello, Wendy," I said softly. "I didn't know," she whispered. The tears started instantly, spilling over her lashes and running down her cheeks. "I didn't know you were there." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my own throat. "I know you didn't. He told me you called." She sobbed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "He told me you called the morning of my induction. He said you told him the drive was too long and the weather was too bad. He said you couldn't be bothered." I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for anger. This was the time for truth. "I drove 15 hours, Wendy," I said. "I was in the hallway while you were sleeping. I brought a blanket." He threw it in the trash. Wendy let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I know. The nurse told me. After the credit card machine declined and everything fell apart, the night nurse came in. She told me everything. She told me about the bad genes comment." She looked down at the car seat, where my grandson was sleeping soundly. "He said that to me too, you know," Wendy said quietly, "in the truck on the way home. He was so angry about the money. He started screaming about how I was ungrateful, just like you. He said I had your weak spirit. He said I had your bad blood. I stepped closer to her. He is a small man. Wendy, he says things to hurt because he is hurting. It wasn't just the words, she said, shaking her head. It was the money. I saw the bill, Mom. I saw the lobster. I saw the valet charges. I was lying in a hospital bed in pain, trying to feed a newborn, and he was treating himself to a vacation on your dime. And then he had the nerve to tell me you didn't care. She looked up at me again, and I saw the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire I had felt in the garden 2 days ago. I kicked him out. She said. My eyes widened. You what? I kicked him out of my house. She said firmly. We got home from the hospital, and he started complaining about the grocery bill. He started lecturing me about how much diapers cost. And I just snapped. I looked at him, and I saw it. I saw 30 years of what he did to you. I saw how he bullied you. And I realized I don't want my son watching that. I don't want my son thinking that's how a man treats a woman. She took a deep breath. So I told him to leave. I told him to go stay with his mother, since she's the one paying his bills now. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since 1990. Oh, Wendy! I'm sorry, Mom, she cried, stepping forward and collapsing into my arms. I'm so sorry I believed him. I'm so sorry I didn't defend you. I should have known. I should have known you wouldn't leave me. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight. She smelled like baby powder and milk, the scent of a new mother. I rubbed her back, just like I did when she was a little girl. It's okay, I whispered into her hair. You know now, that's all that matters. You broke the cycle. Honey, you stood up. We stood there for a long time, crying together on the driveway. It wasn't sad crying, though. It was the kind of crying you do when a fever finally breaks. It was the release of years of tension, years of lies, washing away into the concrete. Eventually, Wendy pulled back and sniffed. She looked down at the car seat. "Do you want to meet him?" she asked. I smiled, and this time the tears in my eyes were pure joy. More than anything in the world. She bent down and unbuckled the straps. She lifted the bundle out of the seat, a tiny sleeping boy wrapped in a soft blue blanket. She turned and placed him gently in my arms. I looked down. He was perfect. He had a shock of dark hair and a little button nose. His skin was soft and pink. He shifted in his sleep, letting out a tiny, contented sigh, and settled against my chest. I held him close, burying my nose in the soft fuzz of his hair. I breathed him in. I thought about Gregory's words. Bad genes. I looked at this baby's fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. I looked at his strong little legs. I looked at the peace on his face. There were no bad genes here. There was resilience. There was the strength of a grandmother who drove through a storm. There was the courage of a mother who stood up to a bully. There was love. So much love that it felt heavy in my arms. He's beautiful, Wendy, I whispered. He's absolutely perfect. His name is Leo, Wendy said softly. Leo. It means lion. A lion, I repeated, smiling down at him. That fits. He's going to be strong. He's going to be brave. He has your chin, Wendy said, smiling through her tears. Poor thing, I joked, causing her to laugh. No, she said seriously. I hope he has your chin. And I hope he has your backbone. Because you were right, Mom. You were right about everything. I looked up at my daughter. She looked tired. Yes, but she looked lighter. The shadow of her father wasn't standing over her shoulder anymore. She was free. We were both free. Come inside, I said, shifting Leo to my other shoulder. I have coffee, and I have a guest room that is quiet and free. You stay as long as you need. Thank you, she said. We walked up the steps to the porch together. I didn't look back at the empty street. I didn't think about Gregory sitting in his mother's house, angry and alone. I just held my grandson, listened to my daughter's footsteps beside me, and walked into my home. The door clicked shut behind us, locking out the past and locking in the future. The bad genes argument was over. The good genes had won. 6 months have passed since the day I drove home from the hospital with a refunded bank account and a broken heart. If you could see my dining room right now, you wouldn't recognize it. The table is set with my good china, the plates with the delicate blue rim that I used to save for special occasions. There is a roast chicken in the center, golden brown and steaming, surrounded by roasted carrots and potatoes. The room smells like rosemary and home. But the best part isn't the food. It's the noise. For years, this house was too quiet. It was the silence of a woman who lived alone and waited for the phone to ring. Now, there are sounds of life. There is the clinking of silverware. There is Wendy's laughter, loud and uninhibited, something I hadn't heard in years. And there is the babbling of 6-month-old Leo, who is sitting in his high chair, banging a plastic spoon against the tray like a little drummer. I sat at the head of the table, watching them. Wendy looked different. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. She had cut her hair into a short, stylish bob that framed her face. She looked like her old self again, the vibrant, confident girl I raised before Gregory's criticism made her small. She was staying with me while she finalized the divorce. It wasn't easy starting over with an infant, but she was doing it. She had found a job working remotely, and we had fallen into a rhythm. I watched Leo during the day while she worked, and we cooked dinner together at night. Mom, Wendy said, catching me staring, "You're not eating. Is the chicken dry?" "No, honey," I smiled, picking up my fork. "The chicken is perfect. I was just taking it all in." "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked. She didn't say his name. We didn't say his name in this house anymore. He was just him. A little, I admitted. I was thinking about how angry he would be if he saw this table. He always hated roast chicken, said it was peasant food. Wendy laughed. "Well, he's eating microwave dinners in his mother's basement right now, so I think we're winning." It was true. We heard through the grapevine, meaning my sister, who still checks Facebook, that Gregory was having a hard time. After the hospital bill fiasco, his financial house of cards had collapsed. He had to sell his truck. He moved back in with his elderly mother because he couldn't afford rent on his luxury condo. The man who wanted to be the king was now living like a pauper, but I didn't feel smug about it. I just felt done. His karma was his business. My legacy was mine. "Actually," I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin, "I have something for you." "For Leo, really?" I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I opened the drawer and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I had been waiting for the right moment to give this to her. Tonight, with the house warm and the baby happy, felt like the right time. I handed the envelope to Wendy. "What is this?" she asked, frowning slightly. "Open it," I said, sitting back down. She slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the document inside. It was a formal legal document, stamped and notarized. She read the title, and her eyes widened. The Leo Gaither Education Trust. "Mom," she whispered, "what is this? Do you remember the refund?" I asked. "The $5,500 I got back from the hospital." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, the bad genes money." "Well," I said, pouring myself a glass of water, "I didn't want to spend that money on bills. It felt like it needed to be used for something important. So I took it, and I added a little bit more that I had saved from my Social Security checks over the last 6 months. I put it all into a high-yield trust fund for Leo." Wendy looked at the paper, her hands trembling. Mom, this is almost $7,000. It's a start, I said. By the time he's 18, with compound interest and the monthly contributions I plan to make, it will be enough for his first 2 years of college. Or a down payment on a house. Whatever he needs. I can't believe you did this, Wendy said, tears filling her eyes. After everything, you're still giving. Read the stipulation, I said, pointing to the paragraph at the bottom of the page. Clause 4. That's the important part. Wendy squinted at the legal text and read it out loud. The sole trustee of this account shall be Wendy Gaither. Under no circumstances shall Mr. Gregory Tinch be granted access, visibility, or authorization regarding these funds. Any attempt by Mr. Tinch to access these assets shall result in an immediate legal restraining order. Wendy looked up at me, a shocked laugh bubbling out of her throat. You put a restraining order in the trust fund. I wanted to be clear, I said, shrugging. He said he didn't want my resources involved. So I made sure they legally never could be. That money is for Leo, not for Gregory's debts, not for his image. It is for my grandson. Wendy reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was strong. You really are a force of nature, aren't you? She said. I'm just a grandmother, I said, and grandmothers protect their own. I looked at Leo. He had stopped banging his spoon and was watching us with wide, curious eyes. He didn't know about the drama. He didn't know about the hospital hallway or the insults. All he knew was that he was warm, he was fed, and he was loved. And that was the victory. Gregory thought he could break me by kicking me out of a room. He thought that by stripping me of my title as guarantor, he stripped me of my worth. But he was wrong. Dignity isn't about being in the VIP suite. It's not about having your name on the door. Dignity is knowing who you are when the door gets slammed in your face. I didn't need to be in the delivery room to be a mother. I just needed to be there when the dust settled. I needed to be the safety net when the tightrope snapped. I looked around my dining room one last time. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't a platinum suite. It was just a small house with a mortgage and a slightly overgrown garden. But it was filled with peace. And you cannot buy peace. You have to build it brick by saying no to the people who try to tear you down. I squeezed Wendy's hand. Eat your chicken, I said, before it gets cold. Yes, ma'am, she smiled. I took a bite of roast chicken. It was delicious. It tasted like freedom. And to Gregory, wherever he was tonight, I hoped he was enjoying his microwave dinner, because this grandmother, she was doing just fine. I learned that you cannot buy respect, but you certainly don't have to pay for your own disrespect. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own peace? Tell me your story below. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love,